One guy that I really respect in many ways is Killer Mike. In many ways, including he's a huge stoner, but he's also also accomplished rapper. He's very good at writing and performing.
Didn't they release another album
They did
recently?
Yes. Run the Jewels is the band, basically the super group that he got together with another already well-known rapper, LP, in New York, and they made this super rap group called Run the Jewels. It's amazing. And so he was on the Joe Rogan Experience talking about white Jesus. And so I know white Jesus in the context of like Korean Christianity, which is pretty Western. It's like Protestant or like Presbyterian, usually pretty conservative. Some of it kind of unorthodox, but
yeah, we were always showed the picture of blue-eyed, blonde-haired white
right.
Jesus.
So Killer Mike explains what white Jesus means to Black culture, and I think it's really interesting. And so let's take a look at that. Killer Mike on Joe Rogan Experience.
That is a crazy one, the white Jesus one, right?
White Jesus is a motherfucker, bro. Like, man, I'm gonna get me a shirt that says "White people won, stay woke," and what I mean by that is Western civilization.
He says, "I'm gonna get myself a shirt that says white people won, like they won the world." And so he's gonna talk about Western civilization.
This is the latest phase. Like, people have to understand, there have been many empires and civilizations. There was a time where Mali in Africa and Kemet in Africa were the biggest civilizations and colonizers on Earth. Later, Persia, like you've had systems, and right now the West has just for the last 1,000 years or so has been kicking and dominating ass. A lot of what we see on the news between the West and what we call the Middle East now, what was once Western Persia or Western Asia, this is thousands of years of war. You're hearing Islam versus Christianity, but it's really two ideologies that have been fighting for thousands of years over how the globe should be governed. So with that shit, man, it's like there's no stopping this shit. But white Jesus springs out of that and kind of goes everywhere and colonizes everything. So, the church pops up with candy for kids, Bibles for you. And by the way, we're going to be gone a while, but we're going to leave this guy here on the wall so you know what what God's son looked like. So if God's son looks like a Doobie Brother, then so does God. God looks like Jim Morrison. You know what I'm saying?
Jim Morrison with a full beard.
Yeah, straight the fuck.
Wow. Yeah,
when really Jesus was probably a tan guy with dark hair and curly hair and and brown eyes. That was saying
like Miguel.
What
Miguel looks more like the real Jesus. Probably
how he explains it is like white Jesus is like a moral shield, and it's like you can basically use. When colonizers come and colonize, they use like the excuse of mission work to like get in because they think they have the moral high ground with assuming that you are already depraved and you need Jesus to die for your sins.
Well, I think the governments send in the people who are willing to die for a weird cause and be like, okay, go in there and then tell them this is when we show up, we're the good guys.
Right.
They always, because Christians believe in martyrdom and self-sacrifice. And so I think governments a lot of times will use those people, those lunatics, to go in and like infiltrate or whatever. And a lot of times Europeans and whatever have used the church to do those things and that dirty bidding. But
yeah, it's unfortunate because Jesus as a figure is like him as a person, like not even as like God, but just as a human, encompasses morality very well. And so for other humans to use that as a way to manipulate other humans is like, it's such a terrible thing.
That's been happening for...
Yeah, he's explaining it. He's explaining how it happens with colonization.
In it that could be seen that can defeat that.
Yeah. Let's keep going with this clip and see what he says about it.
Shit that the government and the church didn't like, so they knocked him the fuck off. Yeah.
What? So he's saying the original Jesus was saying he was a brown skinned, probably curly haired, brown eyed guy who was saying
he was Jewish.
Stuff. Yeah, who was saying stuff that the
born
government
and raised in the Middle East.
So he was like the original like Martin Luther King, where he was saying stuff that was annoying the government and the people in power, and they wanted to off him.
Yeah, that's why they used the criminal justice system
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, or the laws of Rome at that time to put him to death.
Yeah, and now it's co-opted by white Jesus.
They didn't even have the death penalty. The high priest didn't even have that power. He just used the laws of the land.
Think that each race looks for someone of another race to be their advisor.
Because I don't think people trust the divinity in themselves. You know, I think that once you understand that as human beings, we really only look different because of subtle differences in atmosphere and change, and you know who you mix with when. But I think that all those books that our moms paid Oprah to sell us of self-help and inward looking, Reverend Ike had told my grandmother's generation that in the 70s. You know what I mean? And I think that we're scared to turn off the lights and at some point see something divine within ourselves, because once you do that, that requires you act differently. And I think that people need to be told what to do. Not that they actually need it, but they want to be instructed.
That's interesting that he says that. First Joe Rogan asked him the question, why do people look for someone who looks different than them? And then Killer Mike responds by saying people don't necessarily trust the divinity within themselves, because if they accept that they're divine, then they have to act differently.
Yes.
And then he says it's easier for people to people want to be told what to do, because if you're told what to do, you don't necessarily have to think for yourself.
Yeah, and then
Right.
you're not held responsible.
Exactly. I think that's what it.
They told me what to do.
Yeah, no, I think that's really what it is. It's like, how much responsibility is like an individual really want, you know? Because if you act divine, or you understand like the influence and impact you have on the world and like the things around you, then you really are going to act differently. And it's like a lot of people don't want to be responsible for their actions, so they want to be told what to do so they can kind of use that as, well, I did this because of that.
I mean, that's what I was saying. Like, if you read the whole Bible, the whole thing God was trying to tell us to do is like, you can do it for yourselves. Like, you can change the things that need to be changed. You can, you know, and yet we still look for that and try to grasp that divinity, but we don't want it to be.
We don't want to be responsible.
We don't want to say that we can harness it and therefore make ourselves move and do the things that we feel God would want us to do.
Yeah, there's like that saying, it's like man's greatest fear isn't that he can't do anything. Man's greatest fear is that he's able to accomplish anything. I forget.
Yeah, and then it's like, whoa, what did you waste your life on? I'm just kidding.
I guess so, because it's like, oh, you could have really done anything. There wasn't really necessarily anything holding you back other than yourself, really. Well, okay, so let's keep going with this clip.
Versus knowing or going on a gut feeling or experimenting and getting something wrong.
It's also a consequence of, you know, one of the things that bothers me the most when people talk about people that commit crimes or think about people that commit crimes. So much of who a person is a consequence of things that had nothing to do with them.
Absolutely.
They could have been born in a terrible neighborhood to horrible parents and been abused sexually and physically. And by the time you get to them,
They're broken.
their life is already a mess. It's a shambles.
Broken.
And for you to try to
know which
think
way
that
is up.
they are going to look at life and just figure it out with no assistance whatsoever,
Doesn't work.
it's crazy.
Doesn't work like that.
One of the weirder things about our culture is that we haven't put more of an emphasis in finding the spots that are the ghettos and the terrible neighborhoods in this country and figuring out a way to build them up.
Absolutely.
Just make it even.
We know.
Figure out a way.
We know unequivocally where jobs and commerce are present and economic opportunity and prosperity occur, there's a dramatic reduction and elimination in gang violence.
Yeah.
Yet we do not put resources into building institutions that will create entrepreneurs or work on the soft skills so the kids can be working at and around production houses, studios. We put that money into prisons.
Yeah.
And then we use prison labor to undercut things like call centers, things like that jobs, that
Making
factories may
jobs.
need. And we're doing a disservice by doing that.
Well, okay,
and all
so
of our license plates comes from prison.
yeah, that's interesting that Joe Rogan brings that up, because he's like, you know, when people commit crimes, we treat them like criminals basically, and we don't really address
You're no longer a person.
right, because he's like, you don't necessarily understand what happened to that person to make them get there, and we don't have. And Killer Mike's kind of responding where he's like, yeah, we don't really have the resources to rehabilitate anymore. And
we just left it to the police to take care of the problems.
well, I think, yeah.
And it's like they just shoved them in boxes. And it's like, that's not fixing the problem.
But I think also
Like,
society, it's not only like how we deal with it by sending the police, but then our view on people who abuse. So I watched a movie called Spotlight, and it was about the Boston newspaper that was uncovering the Catholic child abuse scandals. And what happened? Right. And what happened was when they were interviewing priests that were allegedly doing the abuse, they were like, "No, I wasn't abusing. I would know because I was abused." And so
it's like they use that scale, and it's like, just don't go that far.
No, but that's the thing. It's
and
like
then it's a well, you have it better than I did.
When a child is abused, they don't grow up becoming functioning adults. They grow up becoming an adult that was abused as a child.
Yes. And they just learned how to cover it up.
Right, and
like
so
it's still in them, and it's still affecting them. They just know how to hide it. Almost. And they're just not even aware.
Society treats them as an adult, like an adult predator, when really they were a child that was abused. And so because of that view that we have on them, we treat them like criminals. And I think that's what Killer Mike is saying or that's what they're kind of discussing is like, or that's what this reminds me of, is basically like if we viewed the people who we saw as detrimental to society and didn't just treat them with basically police and like criminals.
Well, I think we haven't caught up. It's like how I was complaining, like, wow, we have so much technology, and our capacity to use that technology to its most efficient, like we can make so much more, right? And it's the same thing with the criminal justice system, prison system. It's like we know so much more about what makes these criminals, what makes them tick the way they tick, and then how to fix it. We have corrective measures. We have now that knowledge in psychology and sociology, and we know that it's real. It's a real science. It's been proven to and we've got data showing that when you put more money into rebuilding your community and to whatever, instead of just policing the heck out of them and trying to I don't know, then it does, but they won't implement it. I'm not sure why.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's keep going with this clip. We got a
They're
minute and 40
waiting for
left.
the president to tell them, I guess.
And I always say we because we look to our quote unquote leaders and blame them when so many times we allow it. We allow this to happen by not paying attention and not voting. We allow it to happen by not raising our voice, even though we know someone in prison and saying this is wrong. The last people, I don't believe, just for the record, I don't believe in the big three, the Abrahamic religions. I'm not into them. But the books I've read, and they're amazing graphic novels. I kind of read them like a graphic novel of sorts, right? And when you look at the people who Christ died with, right, he was up there with thieves. The last person he saved before he got out of here was a thief. Was a confessed thief, was dying right next to him. And he was like, we're going to go on this together. That's an amazing thing. So as you're serving your Savior or your Messiah, you need to be thinking about who he spent his time with. He was with liars and thieves. He was in the streets. He was with people who alleged to be prostitutes. And I think that if we start to turn our attention to those places and we put our intentions in good there, we do produce on the other side better. But as long as we look at religion as something that makes us holy, makes us clean, washes us of our sins, and we become pious in that, I think religion will be something that's forever kind of harmful and help to create that. And I think that believing that some people are good or evil doesn't allow us to say, well, what could we do to fix those ghettos, to fix those depressed areas? Because for every ghetto where I'm from, for every ghetto that's in a city in the South, I can show you a mountainous region with a trailer park that's just as bad.
For sure.
And those kids deserve a life better than Oxycontin addiction and turmoil and pain too.
You're right, 100%.
Yeah, it's not just black people in prison anymore. Poor white people, all the Latinos too, poor anybody.
Well, I think his point about
pay their way out.
Because he said he's not a big believer in the Abrahamic religion, so Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, but he was saying how he read about Jesus and looking at how Jesus spent his time, it was like with with thieves. Like that's the last person he died
He's
with.
probably read the Bible more than like the majority of the Christians.
No, right,
He
so-
knows enough stories. To
right, so
know about
contrasting-
who Jesus hung out with.
Contrasting him and what he's saying about Jesus hanging out with thieves versus like kind of the white Jesus that we have an image of, which is like, I don't know,
Holier
with like,
than
yeah,
thou.
with like a lamb in
art
his
thou.
arms,
Yeah.
and it's like Jesus wasn't
No, he had
supposed
prostitutes at his feet.
right, and he wasn't. Yeah,
I
he
mean,
was
and that doesn't mean she was like it. Just
no, but
means
he
where
wasn't
the
supposed.
Students sit. He let students speak.
Right, he wasn't necessarily supposed to be a deity among men. He was supposed to bring
He
the
is.
deity. No, he was that as well. But then, the way he treats other men or people like even thieves and prostitutes raises
Recognizing the deity in them.
raises them up to his deityness because he calls them brothers and sisters.
Yes,
And so that's
and a
I
lot
think
of them do step up.
right. And so the radical message of Jesus isn't that Christ is some unattainable form.
Yeah,
It's
that's the
that
wrong
we
way.
are already
He was
there.
coming the other way.
Right. And
Showing
so
us it could be just one man, one person.
yeah, and so it's like I think the misunderstanding of looking at Jesus as like the
Well, that's what they had to sell it as, the devil.
No, right. No, but when they talk about why do people need to look at deities outside of themselves or something that looks different than them, I think it's because, yeah, maybe they don't yet realize the power that Jesus was trying to do, which was empower them, not look at him. I mean, yes, look at him for empowerment
Yes.
first, but then also become empowered themselves. Because I feel like Killer Mike does a better job explaining that than like most pastors for some reason.
That's what I'm saying. Like, if he seemed to have understood the life of Jesus, and that was the whole point of God coming to one person, one place in history. It's like one life to show it.
Right.
And like that means that was just an example. We have to interpret that if we believe in it, really study it, interpret that life for what it is here and now, and live that out.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hope you liked the video. Remember to like and subscribe if you want to see more.
Happy 420 wherever you are. Bye.
And if you don't have buds, we're your buds.